So picture this. You apply for a car loan, maybe nothing crazy, just a decent used car, something reliable, and the dealership pulls your credit. And there's this moment, right, where the finance guy kind of does this thing with his face. You know the face. It's not quite a wince, it's not quite a smile, it's somewhere in between, and your stomach just drops. And then he comes back with a number, an interest rate, and it's not great. And you sit there doing mental math, trying to figure out how this monthly payment somehow ballooned by almost $200 compared to what you expected, and you're nodding along like you understand, but inside you're just thinking, how is my credit score still this low? I pay my bills. That moment has happened to more people than banks will ever admit. And here's the thing, the frustrating, maddening, almost poetic thing is that most of those people were doing something wrong with their credit without even knowing it. Not because they were irresponsible, not because they didn't care, but because the way credit scores actually work is almost deliberately confusing, and nobody really sat them down and explained it properly. My name is Emmy, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, the psychology behind financial systems, and why so many genuinely hard-working people end up on the wrong side of decisions that were never fully explained to them in the first place. I've spent years picking apart the weird, counterintuitive rules that govern personal finance, and credit scores might be the single most misunderstood piece of the whole puzzle. Because here's what I've come to believe after all of this. Most people aren't struggling with their credit because of laziness or bad intentions. They're struggling because they're following advice that sounds right but is actually backwards. They're doing things they were told were responsible, things like closing old accounts, avoiding credit cards altogether, or paying off a loan early, and those things are quietly dragging their score down while they wonder why nothing is improving. Today, I want to walk you through what I call the credit score loophole. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about some shady hack or loophole in the illegal sense. I'm talking about the gap between how people think credit scores work and how they actually work. That gap, for most people, is enormous, and the banks, they're not exactly rushing to close it. By the end of this, you're going to understand your credit score in a way that genuinely changes how you interact with it. Not just the basics, the mechanics, the stuff that makes a real difference. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing we need to clear up, because this misconception is basically everywhere, is what a credit score is actually measuring. Most people assume, reasonably, honestly, that a credit score is a measure of how responsibly you handle money, like it's grading your morality grade. If you pay your bills on time and live within your means, you get a high score. Makes sense, right? Except that's not really what it's doing. A credit score is specifically a measure of how profitable and low risk you are to lenders. That's it. It's not a morality grade. It's not a financial health report. It is, at its core, a tool that helps banks decide how much money they can make off of you while being confident you'll pay them back. And once you understand that distinction, a lot of things start making a lot more sense. Think about it this way. Imagine two people. Person A pays cash for everything, has no debt, never uses credit cards, saves aggressively, and is genuinely great with money, financially responsible in every real sense of the word. Person B carries a couple of credit cards, has a car loan, makes all their payments on time, and keeps their balances low. Who has the better credit score? Person B almost every time, because person A, despite being objectively better with money, gives lenders almost no data to work with. There's no track record, no pattern to predict future behavior. From a bank's perspective, they're basically a stranger, and banks, they don't love strangers. Person B, on the other hand, is giving lenders a rich, predictable history. They know exactly how this person behaves with borrowed money, and that predictability, that's what gets rewarded. This is where a lot of people go wrong right out of the gate. They think avoiding debt means building good credit. It doesn't. Building credit requires using credit, carefully, strategically, consistently. The score isn't judging your character, it's reading your history. The actionable takeaway here is simple but important. Stop thinking of credit as something you earn by being responsible in a general sense, and start thinking of it as a game with specific rules. You have to actually play to win. Section 2. Credit utilization, the number nobody talks about enough. Alright, here's where we start getting into the stuff that I genuinely think banks hope stays confusing, because once you understand this, you start making decisions that are better for you and slightly less profitable for them. Let's talk about credit utilization. Your credit utilization ratio is the percentage of your available credit that you're currently using. So if you have a credit card with a $5,000 limit and you've spent $2,000 on it, your utilization on that card is 40%. Now, most financial advice you'll hear says keep your utilization below 30%, and that's not wrong exactly, but it's also kind of like telling someone who wants to run a marathon to just run a lot. It's technically true and also massively incomplete. Here's what the advice usually leaves out. First, the 30% threshold isn't a cliff edge, it's more like a sliding scale. The lower your utilization, the better. People with truly excellent credit, we're talking 800 and above, typically maintain utilization somewhere under 10%. Some experts say under 7, some even lower. The difference between 30% and 7% utilization can be 30 to 50 points on your score, depending on your overall profile. Second, and this is the part that genuinely surprised me when I first learned it, is your credit score is calculated based on the balance reported by your card issuer, not your balance after you pay the bill. And most issuers report your balance on your statement closing date, not your payment due date. So here's the scenario that trips people up constantly. Someone uses their credit card throughout the month, responsible purchases, nothing crazy, and then pays the full balance before the due date. They're doing everything right, technically, no interest charges, no late fees, but if their balance on the statement closing date was high, that high utilization gets reported to the credit bureaus, and their score takes a hit, even though they paid it all off. The fix is almost annoyingly simple. Pay down your balance before your statement closing date, not just before your due date, or make multiple payments throughout the month so your reported balance stays low. Your score responds to what's being reported, not what you actually owe at any given moment. I remember the first time I explained this to a friend who had been frustrated with her credit score for years. She was doing everything right, no late payments, responsible spending, paying in full every month, and her score was stuck in the low 700s and she couldn't figure out why. Turns out her utilization was being reported at around 35 to 40% every month because she was paying after the statement closed, not before. Changed the timing of her payments, and within 2 billing cycles, her score jumped almost 40 points. 40 points just from changing when she paid. Not how much, not how often, just when. That's the kind of thing that makes me a little frustrated, honestly, because it's such a small piece of knowledge that makes such a meaningful difference. And it's so just responsible not in the standard financial literacy curriculum most people receive.
Maybe it was a card you opened years ago with a high interest rate, or maybe it's just one you don't use anymore. And you think, okay, I'm done with this. Let me close it and clean up my financial picture. Feels like the adult thing to do, right? Except closing that account can genuinely hurt your credit score, sometimes significantly, for 2 separate reasons. The first reason involves something called your credit age, specifically the average age of all your accounts. Credit scoring models reward long credit histories. The longer your accounts have been open and in good standing, the more it signals stability and reliability to lenders. When you close an old account, you potentially lower your average credit age, which dings your score. And it's not just about the old accounts either. If you have a card you opened in, say, 2015 and you close it, that account will eventually fall off your credit report entirely, usually after 10 years. When it does, all of that history disappears. The long, clean, perfect track record you built over a decade just vanishes from the calculation. The second reason is utilization, which we just talked about. When you close a credit card account, you lose that card's available credit limit, which means your total available credit goes down, which means even if your spending habits stay exactly the same, your utilization ratio goes up. So let's say you have 3 credit cards, each with a $5,000 limit. That's $15,000 of available credit. If you're spending $3,000 a month across all 3, your utilization is 20%. Now you close one card. Available credit drops to $10,000. Same $3,000 in spending. Utilization is now 30%. Score drops. You didn't spend more, you didn't change anything about your behavior, you just closed an account because it seemed like the responsible thing to do, and your credit score punished you for doing it. The better move, almost always, is to keep old accounts open, even if you're not using them. If there's an annual fee and you genuinely don't see value in it, you can try calling the issuer and downgrading to a no-fee version. But just leaving it open, even with a 0 balance, keeps the history and the available credit working in your favor. Section 4, the hard inquiry trap and why you're probably falling into it. Okay, so let's talk about hard inquiries for a second, because there's a piece of this that most people understand on a surface level, but then misapply in ways that cost them points.
You probably know that when you apply for new credit, a card, a loan, a mortgage, the lender does what's called a hard inquiry on your credit report. And you probably know that too many hard inquiries can lower your score. Makes people nervous, right? So they avoid applying for anything new and try to minimize how often their credit gets pulled. That part is correct. But here's what the standard advice misses. Not all hard inquiries are treated equally by credit scoring models, and the timing of those inquiries matters enormously. Here's the specific thing I want you to understand. If you're shopping for a mortgage, a car loan, or a student loan, rate shopping basically, checking rates from multiple lenders, credit scoring models like FICO actually account for this. They understand that a smart consumer will check multiple lenders to find the best rate, and they don't want to penalize you for being financially savvy. So multiple hard inquiries for the same type of loan made within a short window, usually 14 to 45 days depending on the FICO version, are typically counted as just one inquiry. This is genuinely important because it means you can and absolutely should shop around for major loans without worrying that you're destroying your credit. Getting quotes from 5 mortgage lenders in 1 week doesn't give you 5 dings. It gives you 1, possibly 0 if you're lucky with the timing. But, and here's where people go wrong, this rate shopping grace period doesn't apply to credit cards. Each credit card application is its own separate inquiry, period. The scoring models don't bundle those. So if you're thinking about opening multiple new credit cards, each application hits your score individually. The practical advice here is to be strategic about when and why you're letting your credit get pulled. If you're planning a big loan, a house, a car, do your rate shopping intentionally within a compressed time frame, and hold off on applying for new cards within the 6 to 12 months before you're going to apply for something significant, because even though individual inquiries are small, they're a signal to lenders that you might be taking on more debt. Section 5, the paying off debt hurts your score paradox. This one makes people genuinely angry when they hear it for the first time, and honestly, I understand why. There are situations, not always, not universally, but real situations where paying off a debt actually causes your credit score to drop, not because you did anything wrong, not because the system glitched, but because of how credit mix works. Your credit mix is one of the factors in your score, and it essentially measures the variety of credit types you're managing. Credit cards are called revolving credit. Mortgages, auto loans, personal loans, student loans, those are installment loans. The scoring models, particularly FICO, actually reward you for managing both types of credit well simultaneously. Having a healthy mix shows lenders that you can handle different kinds of financial obligations. So here's the scenario. You work incredibly hard, sacrifice, maybe even throw extra money at your car loan or your student loan, and you pay it off ahead of schedule. Proud moment. You should be proud. But if that installment loan was your only installment account, your credit mix just got less diverse, and your score can dip, sometimes noticeably, after the account closes. I want to be very clear here. This does not mean you shouldn't pay off debt. Please pay off debt. The interest you save and the psychological freedom of being debt-free are almost always worth more than the credit score points you might temporarily lose. The point isn't to keep debt around forever just to satisfy a scoring algorithm. The point is to understand why your score might drop after something that felt like a huge win, so you don't panic, and so you make informed decisions going forward. If you know ahead of time that paying off your last installment loan might cause a temporary dip, you can plan around it. Maybe hold off on applying for a mortgage a few months after, letting your score stabilize. Knowledge doesn't change the rule, but it changes how you respond to the rule. Section 6, the authorized user strategy, the actual loophole. Okay, we're getting to the part of this video that I think is genuinely underused, and it's the closest thing to a real, legitimate loophole in the credit system as it currently exists. It's called the authorized user strategy, and it works because of a somewhat quirky feature of how credit reporting functions. When someone adds you as an authorized user on their credit card account, that account's entire history, every payment, every year of age, the credit limit, the utilization, can appear on your credit report, even if you never touch the card, even if you never make a single purchase on it. Think about what that means. If your parent or your spouse or a trusted friend with excellent credit and a long-standing, well-managed credit card account adds you as an authorized user, their credit history essentially piggybacks onto yours. Their pristine payment record becomes part of your credit story. This is particularly powerful for people who are just starting to build credit, maybe a young person with a thin credit file, or someone who went through a financial hardship and is rebuilding. Adding one authorized user account from someone with excellent credit can legitimately boost a score by 30, 50, even 100 points in some cases, depending on the starting point.
Now, a few important caveats here, because I don't want to oversimplify this. First, it works both ways. If the primary cardholder starts missing payments or runs up high utilization, that shows up on your report too. You need to trust them completely. This isn't something to do casually with someone whose financial habits you don't actually know. Second, you don't necessarily need to use the card, and honestly, in many arrangements, the authorized user card just stays in a drawer. The credit benefit comes from the account history being reported, not from the spending. Third, some more sophisticated lenders are aware of this strategy and have ways of flagging authorized user accounts in their underwriting process. So it's not magic, and it won't make your credit bulletproof overnight, but as a legitimate, system-compliant way to accelerate credit building, it is real and it works. The deeper principle at work here is that the credit system, for all its flaws, has this interesting feature where relationship capital has actual monetary value. Having the right people in your financial circle, people who are responsible, who are willing to advocate for you in ways that cost them very little, can genuinely change your financial trajectory. That's worth sitting with for a second.
Here's something that probably 40% of people with credit issues have never actually tried: checking their credit report for errors and disputing them. I know, this sounds basic, but the statistics here are genuinely alarming. Studies have found that a significant portion of credit reports contain errors. Some sources put the number as high as 1 in 5 reports having an error serious enough to affect lending decisions. We're talking about accounts that don't belong to you, late payments reported incorrectly, paid off debts still showing as outstanding, accounts listed twice. And here's the part that most people don't know. You have a legal right to dispute any information on your credit report that you believe is inaccurate. Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, are required to investigate disputes, typically within 30 days, and remove or correct information that can't be verified. That last part matters. They don't just have to prove it's right, they have to be able to verify it. If the original creditor no longer exists, or if they can't pull the records, or if they just don't respond in time, the item has to be removed. The practical step here is go to annualcreditreport.com, pull all 3 of your reports, you're entitled to free ones, and actually read through them. Look for anything unfamiliar, look for duplicate accounts, look for payment statuses that seem wrong, and then dispute anything that looks off directly through the Bureau's website. I've seen people clear 60, 80 points off their score simply by catching and disputing a single incorrectly reported late payment. One item, one dispute. Months of real, meaningful score improvement. It takes maybe an hour, and it is, without question, the highest return on time activity available to anyone working on their credit. Section 8. The timing game. When to do what? Let's pull all of this together with something I think is underappreciated. Credit improvement is a timing game as much as it's a behavior game. Most people think about credit in a reactive way. Their score is low, so they want to fix it. But the smartest approach is to think about credit in a proactive and sequenced way, understanding that certain actions should come before others, and that timing relative to major financial events matters enormously. If you know you're going to apply for a mortgage in 12 months, that timeline completely changes how you should be managing your credit right now. You should be paying down revolving balances, avoiding new credit applications, keeping every single account current, and potentially getting yourself added as an authorized user somewhere to give your score a final lift before the application. If you're just starting to build credit, the sequence matters too. Start with a secured card or a credit builder loan. Let that age for at least a year. Add a second card. Keep utilization low. Let both accounts age. Then maybe look at a small installment loan. Layer the credit types gradually rather than trying to open everything at once. The credit game rewards patience in a way that our culture doesn't really celebrate. We're wired to want immediate results, and credit improvement is fundamentally a slow process. Even with perfect behavior, meaningful score changes usually take 3 to 6 months to fully show up. Major rebuilding, from a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a string of late payments, can take 2 to 4 years of consistent, disciplined behavior. But here's the thing about those 2 to 4 years. They're passing anyway. Time is always moving. The question is just whether you're using it or wasting it. So let's come back to where we started. That person sitting across from the finance guy at the dealership, stomach dropping, trying to do math on an interest rate that doesn't quite make sense. That could be any of us. That has been a lot of us at some point in some version. And what I want you to take from everything we've talked about today isn't just a list of credit tips. It's a shift in how you understand the system you're operating inside of.
Because here's what I believe. The gap between people who have good credit and people who don't is rarely a gap in effort or responsibility. It's almost always a gap in information. It's knowing that utilization gets reported on the statement date. It's knowing that closing old cards can hurt you. It's knowing that hard inquiries for rate shopping get bundled together. It's knowing that authorized users can borrow the credit history of people they trust. None of these things are complicated once you understand them, but until you do, they work against you silently, costing you points you don't know you're losing, and dollars you don't realize you're overpaying. The banks and lenders operating in this space, they're not evil exactly, they're just businesses, and the current system benefits them. The more confusion there is around credit, the more people make suboptimal decisions that end up being profitable for lenders. The higher your interest rate, the more money they make. The less you understand your credit score, the less effectively you can negotiate. That's just the reality. But that reality changes the moment you understand the mechanics, and that's honestly the most quietly empowering thing about personal finance in general. Knowledge is disproportionately valuable here. Most people in your life don't know this stuff, which means just knowing it puts you in a genuinely different position. So here's what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, not someday, actually this week. Pull your credit report. Look at your utilization numbers. Check the statement closing dates on your cards. Look for errors. Think about whether there are any old accounts you've been tempted to close that you should maybe leave alone. And if you know someone with excellent credit who trusts you, have an honest conversation about the authorized user strategy. Small moves, small adjustments, applied consistently over time with an understanding of why they work. That's what actually changes your credit score. Not some magic trick, not some aggressive hack, just a clearer picture of the game and a more intentional way of playing it. You've got more leverage here than you probably realized, and that's not a small thing.